A wedding is just a party. Chloe, a baby is a legacy. That's what my sister, Vanessa, told me 4 weeks before I was supposed to walk down the aisle. She said it with the casual arrogance of someone who had never wanted for anything, then scheduled her lavish baby shower for the exact same day, the exact same hour. My father, the man who'd promised he'd be there, chose champagne toasts in a manicured garden over holding my hand. He let me stand alone. Before I tell you what happened next, if this kind of story feels painfully familiar, take a second to like and subscribe, but only if you feel that connection. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. My name is Chloe Larson. I'm 29, and this is how I learned that sometimes the family you choose is the only one that truly shows up in the Larson family. There was an unspoken commandment: thou shalt orbit around Vanessa. My father, David Larson, had spent his life as a history professor at UCSB, a man of quiet intellect and even quieter convictions, who valued tenure and a predictable pension plan. My mother, Eleanor, was a homemaker who treated the garden club like it was the Senate floor and whose self-worth was directly tied to the social standing of her children. We lived in a respectable, but unremarkable, Spanish-style home in the San Roque neighborhood of Santa Barbara. It was a life of comfortable obscurity. Then, 6 years ago, Vanessa married Julian Croft. The Crofts weren't just wealthy, they were a Santa Barbara dynasty built on commercial real estate. Julian was the Prince Regent, and marrying him didn't just elevate Vanessa, it transformed our entire family. He moved my parents into a larger house with an ocean view, paid off their mortgage, and gifted my mother a platinum American Express card that she used with religious fervor. In return, the Larsons treated Vanessa like she'd single-handedly discovered a cure for a rare disease. Vanessa hadn't worked a day since her wedding. She chaired charity galas and called herself a philanthropist. But really, her full-time job was being Mrs. Julian Croft. In my family, marrying a fortune was indistinguishable from earning one. And then there was me, the younger daughter, the quiet one who worked as a freelance graphic designer for local wineries. My life was small, contained within a rented bungalow in the funk zone, with a succulent garden on the porch and a rescue dog named Gus. I didn't have a corner office. I had a corner of my living room with an iMac and a stack of sketchbooks. I never envied Vanessa's money. I envied the fact that her money made my parents forget I even had a name. I met Leo Sterling 3 years ago at a local art walk. He was standing beside one of his sculptures, a twisting column of reclaimed cypress wood that looked like it was caught between being a flame and a human figure. He was staring at it with such fierce concentration, a frown creasing his brow, that I thought he was about to smash it. I made a joke about it. He looked up, and the intensity in his dark eyes, a quiet, grounded force, made the whole world go silent for a second. Leo is a sculptor. He works primarily with wood and stone, creating pieces that feel both ancient and modern. He has the kind of raw, undeniable talent that the art world calls a major voice, and my family calls a hobby that doesn't pay the bills. He sold his work through a small gallery in town and took on commissions for landscape design to make ends meet. Some months were lean, but what we were building felt real, honest. That was a currency my family had never learned to value. They never even tried to see it. Thanksgiving, 7 months before the wedding, I brought Leo to my parents' new, Julian-funded house for the first time. Vanessa and Julian arrived in a black Tesla, carrying a case of wine from a vineyard Julian was thinking of buying. I brought a bottle of local Syrah from a winery whose label I had designed. My father placed Julian's case on the counter like a holy relic. My bottle was opened and forgotten in the kitchen, over dinner. Julian leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine. "So, Leo," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Chloe tells me you work with your hands. Must be grounding. Vanessa chimed in, her voice a silken weapon of pity. It's just wonderful that Chloe has found someone so passionate. Not everyone is built for the real world. Leo didn't rise to the bait. He just reached for my hand under the table, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. His silence was stronger than any argument. What no one at that table knew was that Leo had just been offered a commission by our landlord, a man named Arthur Vance, for a piece to be installed in the lobby of a building he owned. It was the biggest commission of Leo's career so far. I didn't know the details. I just knew it was the first time I'd seen him truly hopeful. Arthur Vance was the kind of man you'd overlook in a crowd. 70 years old, with a mane of white hair and a preference for worn denim jackets. He owned the small complex of artist studios where Leo lived and worked. The rent was impossibly low for Santa Barbara. When Leo asked him why, Arthur just grunted and said, "I'd rather have sculptors than stockbrokers. They make less noise." To me, he was just our kind, eccentric landlord who sometimes brought us avocados from his tree and never cashed the rent check until the 5th of the month. But Arthur had a habit of showing up at Leo's studio with coffee, watching him work for hours. He'd stand there, silent, and then say something like, "The grain on that piece of olive wood, don't fight it. Let it tell you where the curve goes." Leo would listen, and the piece would come alive. One afternoon, Arthur said something that stuck with me. "You know, your work has the soul of a Brancusi, but the hands of a Californian?" I smiled, thinking it was just a nice compliment. I should have Googled the name. I should have asked more questions. In February, Leo proposed. We were on Butterfly Beach at sunset. He didn't have a diamond. Instead, he'd carved a ring from a smooth piece of serpentine stone, its green color the exact shade of the ocean at dusk. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I called my parents that night to tell them the news. We'd set a date, October 12th, a simple ceremony at the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden, under the redwoods. My mother's first question wasn't, "Are you happy?" It was, "How many people are you inviting? Julian's family has a certain expectation." Vanessa sent a one-word text, "Cute." No call, no questions about the dress, no offer to help from the sister who organized $100,000 charity balls in her sleep. My father was the one who surprised me. "I'll be there, kiddo," he said, his voice sounding more like the dad I remembered from my childhood. "I'll be proud to walk you down that aisle, I promise." I clung to that promise like a life raft. We did it all ourselves. I designed the invitations. A simple watercolor of the Redwood Grove. Leo built the arch we would stand under from a single piece of driftwood he found on the beach. It was ours. I knew something was wrong when Vanessa didn't object to the date, didn't offer a single unsolicited opinion. With my sister, silence wasn't peace, it was the quiet before a storm. 2 months before the wedding, the storm hit. I got a call from my aunt, my mother's sister. "Chloe, darling, I'm so confused," she said. "I have your wedding invitation for the 12th, but I also just received Vanessa's invitation for her baby's shower. They're on the same day." My blood ran cold. "What time is the shower?" "Noon," she said, "at the Belmond El Encanto, that gorgeous hotel in the hills. My wedding was at 2 p.m. at the Botanic Garden. The venues were 20 minutes apart, but no one could attend a 4-hour, catered luncheon and then make it to my ceremony. No one." She had made them choose. I called Vanessa, my hands shaking. She answered, her voice syrupy sweet. "Oh, honey, you won't believe it. It was the only Saturday the hotel had available for the next 6 months. Julian booked it as a surprise. I can't possibly move it now. But your wedding isn't until the afternoon. People can just pop over after the shower, right?" She knew it was impossible. She knew the geography. She knew the timing. It was a surgical strike. Then came the final, devastating blow. Besides, she sighed, a wedding is just a party. This is my first baby. You get it, don't you? I called my mother first, my heart hammering against my ribs. Mom, I said, my voice tight. You know my wedding is on the 12th. A pause, a long, weighted silence that told me everything before the words did. I know, sweetheart, but Vanessa, she really needs us there. Julian's parents will be there. And it's our first grandchild. It's a legacy. There was that word again, legacy, as if my marriage was a fleeting party. Couldn't you just move your date? It's such a small affair anyway. A small affair? My entire future, my commitment to the man I loved, dismissed as an inconvenience. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I just said, I've already paid for everything. Mom, the invitations are sent. Well, she sighed, a martyr to circumstances she had willingly embraced. I'm sure some of your friends will still come to yours. Yours? Like it was a separate, lesser event. I called my father next. He did what he always did when faced with a conflict between his two daughters. He capitulated to the one with the wealthier husband. Let me talk to your mother, he said, his voice strained. We'll figure something out. He never called back. A week later, my cousin sent her regrets, then my aunt, then my uncle. The excuses were all the same. We'd love to be there, but we're committed to Vanessa's shower. Committed, as if it were a sacred vow. The morning of October 12th was perfect, the kind of clear, crisp autumn day in Santa Barbara where the sky is a painful, beautiful blue. My best friend, Maya, was helping me with my hair, my dress, a simple, elegant lace sheath I'd found at a vintage shop, hung on the door. My bouquet of wildflowers sat in a vase on the table. My phone rang at 10 a.m. It was my father. Chloe? Honey? His voice was thin, reedy. I don't know how to say this. Your mother and I were already at the hotel. Vanessa needed our help setting up, and with the traffic to get down to the garden afterwards, I just don't think we can make it. I counted my breaths. 1, 2, 3. The promise he'd made, the one I'd held onto like a piece of solid ground, crumbled into dust. You promised you would walk me down the aisle, Dad. I know, and I'm so sorry, but this is for Vanessa's baby. You'll have other big moments. My voice came out colder and steadier than I thought possible. No, this is my only wedding day. There won't be another one. Chloe, please don't make this harder than it has to be. I hung up. I didn't slam the phone down. I placed it gently on the counter, as if it were a fragile artifact from a life I no longer lived. We arrived at the Botanic Garden at 1:30. 50 white chairs were arranged in neat rows under the towering redwoods. 6 of them were occupied. 6. Maya, Leo's 2 closest friends from his artist co-op, my one friend who drove down from San Francisco, and Arthur Vance, our landlord, who was wearing a beautifully tailored navy suit I'd never seen before. The string duo I'd hired began to play. The sound of the cello echoed through the empty grove, a beautiful, lonely sound. Maya squeezed my hand. I can walk with you. I shook my head, my eyes fixed on Leo, who was waiting for me under the driftwood arch, his face a storm of emotions. No, you're my maid of honor. Your place is up there. I was about to take that first step alone, to walk myself toward my new life. Then, I heard a quiet voice behind me. I believe I am grievously overdressed for a casual stroll. I turned. Arthur stood there, his silver hair catching the dappled sunlight. He wasn't smiling, but his eyes were kind. Your father should be here, he said, his voice calm and firm. But since he's chosen not to be, it seems only right that someone who actually appreciates what you and Leo have built should have the honor. He extended his arm. Tears I hadn't allowed myself to cry finally broke free. I took his arm, and we walked down the aisle, The 6 people in the chairs stood up. The sun filtered through the redwood canopy, and at the end of the path, Leo was waiting. The ceremony was short. We said our vows, the ones we'd written ourselves on scraps of paper. 6 people clapped in that quiet grove, surrounded by empty chairs. It was more than enough. 2 weeks later, Arthur invited us to his house for dinner. It was the first time we'd been inside. The walls were covered in art, not just decorative paintings, but pieces I vaguely recognized from art history books. Rothko, Diebenkorn, a small, exquisite Giacometti sketch in a simple frame. He handed us glasses of wine. "There's something I should have told you both a long time ago," he said, pulling a thick, leather-bound book from a shelf. It was an exhibition catalog. On the cover, in elegant silver letters, it read, "Vance Galleries, Los Angeles, a retrospective." I owned one of the most prominent contemporary art galleries in L.A. for 30 years, he said simply. "I retired up here to get away from the noise, but I never stopped looking for real talent." He looked directly at Leo. "I've been watching you work for 2 years. You're not just talented. Son, you're a once-in-a-generation voice." He went on to explain. 6 months earlier, before we were even engaged, Arthur had been sending photos of Leo's work to Elias Thorne, the tech billionaire, the most aggressive and discerning collector of modern sculpture in the world. Thorne had bought a piece sight unseen for $250,000. Leo looked at me, his expression pained. "I was going to tell you," he whispered. "I swear, but it all got so crazy with the wedding, and I didn't want this to be about money. I wanted it to be about us." And then came the rest of it. Arthur had brokered a deal, a formal commission agreement with Elias Thorne for a series of 12 large-scale sculptures to be completed over 2 years. The total contract was for $4.5 million. I felt the air leave my lungs. I sat down on a leather armchair, staring at the numbers on the contract Arthur placed on the table. It was real. It was all real. The next day, Elias Thorne called Leo personally. His voice was warm, energetic. "Leo, my boy, Arthur tells me you two just got hitched. A travesty what your family pulled. My yacht, the Stardust, is docked in Cabo San Lucas. It's sitting empty. I want you and your beautiful bride to take it for 2 weeks. My crew will take care of everything. Consider it a wedding present." I hesitated. I had spent my whole life trying not to take up space, not to be a bother. But then I thought of the 50 empty chairs. I thought of my father choosing a hotel party over his own daughter. I thought of Vanessa's smug, dismissive voice. "Yes," I said, my voice clear and firm. "We accept." While we were packing, I got a text from my aunt, heard some terrible news about Julian's company, something about bad investments. Hope he and Vanessa are okay. Colette, an obsessive Instagram poster, had gone completely dark for a week, a bad sign. Then my mother called. "Chloe, honey, how are you? We were just thinking. We should have you and Leo over for dinner when you have a moment." Her voice was brittle with forced cheerfulness. I knew what it was. The well was running dry, and they were scouting for a new one. On our last night in Cabo, I did something I rarely do. I posted a picture. It was a photo Leo had taken of me standing on the deck of the Stardust at sunset, the famous arch of Cabo in the background. I was wearing a simple white dress, a glass of champagne in my hand, and I was smiling. A real, unburdened smile. I wrote a simple caption, "Honeymoon with my incredible husband, grateful for the people who show up." I posted it, put my phone away, and fell asleep to the sound of the ocean. I woke up the next morning to a vibration that wouldn't stop. I looked at my phone. The screen was a blinding cascade of notifications. 528 missed calls, voicemails, and text messages. The same family who couldn't be bothered to send a single congratulations on my wedding day had apparently found their phones. I sat on the edge of the plush bed, the morning sun streaming through the porthole, and I read every single one of those 528 messages, not with anger, but with a kind of cold, anthropological curiosity. It was an autopsy of a family's character. My father, 32 missed calls, a frantic series of texts that went from confusion, whose boat is that, to command, Chloe, call me immediately, to feigned concern, are you okay? And finally, to a breathtaking attempt at revisionist history. We are so incredibly proud of you and Leo. Always knew he had it in him. My mother. 26 calls. Her texts were a masterclass in emotional whiplash. OMG, Chloe, is that Cabo? Followed by, I'm so happy for you too. Sweetheart, we must have a big party to celebrate when you're back. Celebrate. The woman who told me my wedding was a small affair now wanted to pop champagne corks over a yacht she saw on Instagram. And Vanessa. 10 calls, just 3 texts, each one more transparent than the last. The first, at 3:15 a.m., Santa Barbara time. What the hell is this? The second. An hour later, is Leo actually selling his sculptures now? And the final one, sent just before sunrise. Chloe. We really need to talk. Call me. The rest were a chorus of cousins and aunts who had RSVP'd a no to my wedding, now flooding my inbox with heart emojis and declarations of how they'd always believed in us. The most audacious message came from Julian, a direct text, the first he'd ever sent me. Chloe. Congrats. Heard Leo is doing great things. I represent a few clients who are major art investors. Would love to connect him. The man whose wealth had held my family hostage was now trying to network his way back to solvency through the brother-in-law he'd openly mocked. I didn't reply. Not to a single one. An hour later, Leo found me on the balcony, staring out at the turquoise water. He didn't have to ask. He just put his arms around me. I'm not going to let them ruin this, I said, my voice quiet but solid, but I'm not going to pretend they didn't try. That afternoon, I unmuted the family group chat. I typed one message, read it over twice, and hit send. Thank you all for your messages. Leo and I are well, for those asking. Leo signed a major commission agreement with a private collector 2 months ago. This honeymoon on his patron's yacht was a wedding gift. I want to be direct. Your collective decision to skip our wedding on October 12th was deeply painful. My father broke his promise to walk me down the aisle. My mother prioritized a party, and my sister intentionally created the conflict. I am not saying this out of anger, but out of a need for honesty. I need time and space. When I am ready to speak with any of you, I will be the one to reach out. Please respect that. Then I muted the chat again and put the phone in a drawer for the rest of the trip. 3 weeks later, back in Santa Barbara, the press release went out from a prestigious gallery in Los Angeles. Leo Sterling, the unseen attendant, a solo exhibition. The announcement was picked up by the LA Times Arts section. The article featured a photo of Leo in his studio, standing beside the exhibition's centerpiece. The opening night felt like a dream. The gallery was packed with a hushed, reverent crowd of collectors, critics, and artists. I stood beside Leo, holding his hand, as people stared at the work that had been born from our pain. At the center of the main room, bathed in a single spotlight, was the piece that had everyone talking. It was titled, simply, October 12th, 2 p.m. He had sculpted 50 chairs from cold, gray soapstone, arranged in perfect rows as if for a ceremony. They were stark, identical, and achingly empty. But near the front, there were 6 chairs carved from warm, polished walnut wood. Each one was unique, its grain and shape subtly different, conveying a distinct presence. They weren't occupied by figures, but they felt inhabited, alive with loyalty and warmth. The contrast between the cold stone and the living wood was devastating. It was a perfect, silent monument to what had happened. It didn't scream. It stated a fact. A reporter from the Times approached Leo. "The title is so specific," she said. "Is it autobiographical?" Leo looked at her, his gaze unwavering. "Yes," he said. "It was my wedding day. We had 50 chairs and 6 guests." A hush fell over the people nearby. By the next morning, the story wasn't just about a brilliant new sculptor. It was about the painting, the family, the empty chairs. We hadn't intended it, but the truth was now a matter of public record. The first call came from my mother. Her voice was a broken whisper. "Chloe, your father saw the article. He read it online. He's just been sitting in his office for hours. He won't speak." "I didn't sculpt it, Mom," I said, my voice devoid of malice. "Leo sculpted what happened." There was no reply to that. Vanessa's reaction was fury, not remorse, but rage at being exposed. Her carefully constructed world of social perfection had been shattered by a block of stone. Brett had officially filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The Ocean View house Julian had bought for my parents was in foreclosure. The Amex card had been canceled. The illusion was gone. My father called a week later. "Chloe," he began, his voice raspy with shame. We are going to lose the house. I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but I have to." I let the silence hang in the air, a mirror of the silence he had left me in on my wedding morning, 6 months ago, I said, my voice level. "You told me not to make things harder than they had to be as you broke the most important promise a father can make. I'm not a backup plan, Dad. I'm the daughter you decided was optional." "You're right," he whispered. It wasn't an apology that could fix anything, but it was the truth. Vanessa was the last to call. She tried to soften me with a breathless, "I miss you, Chloe." But within a minute, she got to the point. "Brett has lost everything. Mom and Dad are losing the house. You and Leo have so much now. Can't you just help? For the family?" "What family? Vanessa?" I asked calmly. "The family that chose a catered lunch over my wedding? The family that vanished when I had nothing and reappeared when they saw a picture of a yacht? I love you, but I will never again set myself on fire to keep you warm. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be built on something real, not on what you need from me." She hung up. 6 months later, Leo and I bought a house in the hills of Montecito, a small, modern home with an entire floor that we turned into his studio, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Pacific. I left my freelance work behind after a major publisher offered me a position as a senior creative director. We'd paid for the house in full. Arthur came for dinner every Sunday, bringing wine and stories of the art world. He, Maya, and Leo's friends. They were our family. They were the 6 walnut chairs. One afternoon, a letter arrived. It was from Vanessa, a real letter, written on paper. It was full of justifications and self-pity, but one sentence stood out. "I scheduled the shower on your day on purpose. I was afraid that if you were happy, people would stop paying attention to me. I read it, folded it, and placed it in a desk drawer. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a beginning. But my parents moved into a small condo. My father took on extra tutoring work. Colette got a job as an event planner for a hotel. I hear she's good at it. And me? I'm standing on my deck, watching the sunset paint the ocean in strokes of orange and purple. Leo is in his studio below. I can hear the soft chip of a chisel against stone. He's starting a new series. This one is about light finding its way into enclosed spaces. It's about us. We didn't get the wedding we planned, but we built a marriage that is more solid than stone and more beautiful than any sculpture. We built a legacy of our own. True wealth is not measured by what you have, but by the peace you feel when you no longer need the approval of those who failed to value you. Self-respect is a quiet victory, won not in loud confrontations, but in the steadfast refusal to be an option. Now I have to ask you, would you have answered those 528 calls, or would you have left the phone in the drawer? Tell me what you would have done in the comments, and hit subscribe for the next story.